What's up, OOT runners? Today, we are going to talk about the B button. It's a pretty complicated button. Through the course of an OOT playthrough, it can have any of a bunch of different items on it. If you've just started or gotten your sword knocked away by Ganon, or deleted your sword by a glitch, it can be empty. During normal gameplay, the B button can have the Kokiri sword, the Master sword, Bigoron's sword, or Giant's knife, with each of which Link can perform any of up to 10 unique attacks. During horseback riding or archery minigames, it can have the Fairy bow. During the child target game, it can have the Fairy slingshot. During bombchu bowling, it can have bombchus. In the fishing pond minigame, it can have the fishing rod. This button was built for versatility, and in the context of speedruns, we've given it plenty more jobs than the many it was already intended for. Luckily for us, it accepts those jobs without complaint, most of the time. If you've seen my video about Reverse Bottle Adventure, which I highly recommend you watch before continuing this one, you'll remember that the B button can be assigned bottled items as well, and the process breaks the game wide open, allowing us to take item ID numbers of those bottles from the B button and write them directly into our inventory. Well, as you might expect from the name Reverse Bottle Adventure, there exists an opposite process that is very surprisingly called Bottle Adventure. Bottle Adventure is the process of reading one byte from arrangements of data in our inventory and interpreting that byte as the ID of an item that will end up on the B button. Put more simply, Bottle Adventure is a glitch which takes a number from your inventory and puts the item named by that number directly on B. With this glitch, we can do so many useful things. We can even use an item on B that we don't want to or need to go out of our way to acquire legitimately, such as high-value trade items or the Megaton Hammer. We can use Pharaoh's Wind on B in the overworld, opening up absurd levels of freedom in our ability to wrong warp. We can even put any item ID value from the entire item list on B, ranging from 0 to 255, allowing us to experiment with glitched items and those that are impossible to access otherwise. In my RBA video, I spent a while explaining how the inventory system works in great detail. I went over the structure of the inventory slots, the addresses for the B and C buttons, and the secondary C buttons. I explained how the game equips items, how it deals with updating C buttons with new content, and how it keeps track of those changes in the correct source inventory slots, especially as these things relate to bottled items. If these topics are unfamiliar to you, then I'll once again highly recommend that you watch the RBA video before continuing, as that knowledge is an important prerequisite for what we're about to jump into. You can find a link to it in the description of this video. So the first thing we need to talk about is how we can initiate Bottle Adventure in the first place. But even before that, we need to talk about time travel. When Link travels in time, how does the game remember what to put back on his C buttons when he returns again? Well, if you recall, OOT had that series of 7 addresses for the B and C buttons. The first 4 hold the item IDs of the items on the B and 3 C buttons, and the last 3 hold the inventory slot numbers that the 3 items on the C buttons were equipped from. Those last 3 let the game know what slots in inventory to update in case one of the C buttons changes. So for example, when I equip an empty bottle, item number 20, from inventory slot number 18 to C left, the game writes a 20 to C left so that an empty bottle appears there, and it also writes an 18 to our secondary C left slot to keep track of where that empty bottle came from. If the player then presses C left to swing that empty bottle to catch a fish, the game knows it needs to write a fish bottle, item 25, to the C left slot. Then the game offsets itself from that slot by 3 addresses so that it finds itself on the secondary C left slot. It checks the contents there and knows now to look at inventory slot 18, where it will update the item found there to be a fish bottle as well. That concept of using the secondary C buttons as pointers to inventory to keep the C buttons and their corresponding inventory slots in sync is really important. It is also used to maintain proper equips when time traveling. At all times, there are actually 3 copies of Link's equips. The first one I'll call Link's live equips. These are the ones that we've been working with up to this point, and they are directly tied to the state of your B, C, and secondary C buttons. Then there is a copy of Child Link's equips and a copy of Adult Link's equips, both stored separately from the live equips. We'll call these the backup Child equips and the backup Adult equips, respectively. With these 3 different sets of equips in mind, let's track exactly what happens when time traveling with an example. Consider these 3 sets of equips. The live equips match the backup Child equips, because Link is currently in the child age. The backup adult equips were set like this from the last time Link was an adult, and represent the state of his buttons the moment he left for the past. At that point, I had the Master Sword on B, an empty bottle from slot 18 equipped to C left, the Fairy Ocarina from slot 7 equipped to C down, and bombs from slot 2 equipped to C right. When we return to the future, the game will check the backup adult equip to determine what to put on the live equip buttons. But it's not as simple as a copy-paste. The game sequentially checks B, C left, C down, and then C right to see if any of them are items that could have potentially changed during his visit to the past, specifically bottles and trade items, items 20 through 55. If it finds one, it will check the corresponding secondary C button, look at the inventory slot that it mentions, and populate the live equip accordingly. This way, if the contents of any of those inventory slots changed while as Child Link, the C buttons will update appropriately when returning to adult. So in this example as Child Link, let's say I catch a fish in the bottle that the adult backup equip noted on C left. I acquire the Ocarina of Time and dupe a bottle over my bomb slot. Now I return to adult. What's the process for resolving the live equips with the adult backup? Well, first up is the B button. The game copies the adult backup B to the live B. It checks to see if the contents are an item that was subject to change, a bottle or a trade item. It is not, since it's the Master Sword, so no action is taken, and the live B button is correct. Next is C left. The game copies both the primary and secondary C left buttons from the adult backup to the live equips. It checks primary C left to see if it was an item that could have changed during the visit to the past. It finds an empty bottle, a match. So extra steps must be taken to make sure this bottle's state matches inventory. The game offsets itself by 3 addresses to arrive at the secondary C left slot. It sees the reference to inventory slot 18 and checks there to find a fish bottle, in fact different from the empty bottle currently equipped. It replaces the primary C left slot with a fish bottle to match. This check was successful and prevented a desync between inventory and equips. Next is C down. The game copies both the primary and secondary C down buttons from the adult backup to the live equips. It checks primary C down to see if it was an item that could have changed during the visit to the past. It finds the Fairy Ocarina, not a bottle or trade item, so no action is taken and the Fairy Ocarina remains on the live C down. Note that in this case, a desync between the live equip and the inventory has actually occurred. We got the Ocarina of Time during this visit to the past. However, the game developers supposed that this would be impossible, since the Ocarina of Time is intended to be Child 1 only. Only bottles and trade items would ever be subject to change under normal gameplay conditions, so changes in other slots resulting from glitches or sequence breaks are not accounted for, and desyncs such as this one can occur. Finally is C right. The game copies both the primary and secondary C right buttons from the adult backup to the live equips. It checks primary C right to see if it was an item that could have changed during the visit to the past. It finds bombs, not a bottle or a trade item, so no action is taken and bombs remain on the live C right. Here again we see a desync from inventory. I duped a bottle over my bomb slot while I was Child Link. However, since bombs are not an item that the devs ever expected would be subject to change, an inventory check is not made for this item. This behavior, interestingly enough, is useful. It actually allows me to use a bottle as Child Link and bombs as Adult Link, with both items being sourced from the same inventory slot. Great, so now we understand how the game maintains inventory and equips through time travel, an important topic to be sure, but how is it relevant to Bottle Adventure? Well, I did start off by saying this video is all about the B button, so let's take a closer look at the B button in the process we just outlined. When we step through our example, the adult backup B button had the Master Sword on it. Since this item is not subject to change during the visit to the past, the game did not try to update it. It didn't bother checking inventory. But as we know, via reverse Bottle Adventure, we can have a bottle on B. So what would happen if we had a bottle on B as Adult Link, went back in time so that the backup adult equip reflects that bottle on B, and then returned to adult? Well, first, as before, the game copies the backup adult B button to the live B button. As before, it checks to see if the contents are an item that was subject to change, a bottle or a trade item. This time though, it does find a bottle. So from the game's perspective, it figures this is a bottle that Adult Link had equipped before he became a child. And now, it has to check inventory to see if that bottle changed while Link was a child. How does it do this? Well, it follows the same process that it would if this were a C button. It offsets itself by 3 addresses to look for the corresponding secondary C button. But the B button doesn't have one of those, and the game finds itself on the live primary C right button. It treats what it sees there as an inventory slot number, as if it was a secondary C button. But of course, the live primary C right button has the item ID number of what Child Link had equipped. In this case, that was the Lens of Truth, item ID number 15. Treating this as an inventory slot number, the game checks inventory slot 15, considering this to be the source of the B button's bottle. Here it finds the Megaton Hammer, and decides that this must be the new state of this bottle after Link's visit to the child age. So it updates the B button to be the hammer, and then proceeds to check the C buttons in the same way as before. This hammer on B is the real deal. It functions exactly as if we had hammer on a C button. Alright, finally we have reached the statement of Bottle Adventure. When adult Link has an item on B that the game considers to be subject to change, namely bottles or trade items, or an item with ID in the range 20 to 55, and then travels back in time to child and forward again to adult, his B button will be populated with the item whose ID resides at the inventory slot specified by the item ID on Child Link's primary C right button. In short, Child Link's C right selects where in inventory to look for an item, and the item found there will be written to the B button. If you've made it this far, then good job, that was a lot to cover, but there's still a whole lot more to learn about BA. First, I want to explain why Bottle Adventure can only go in this direction, affecting adult Link's B button. From the explanations I've given, you might expect that maintaining equips through time travel is a completely symmetric process. But there's actually one difference between traveling from child to adult and traveling from adult to child. When traveling from child to adult, the game handles the B button as we learned before, checking the backup adult equips to see what's supposed to go there. This makes sense. In normal gameplay, it could be the Master Sword, Biggoron Sword, or the Broken Giant's Knife, so it reuses the algorithm intended for the C buttons and exposes the potential for Bottle Adventure in the process. However, when traveling from adult to child, the devs realized that the B button should only ever be the Kokiri Sword under normal conditions, and so they hard-coded it to be so. The game skips the normal set of steps and sets the live B button directly to be the Kokiri Sword with no regard for what was on the backup child B button. This has two notable effects. The first and most relevant to us is that it's impossible to do Bottle Adventure via time traveling from adult to child, since the game doesn't care if a bottle was on the backup child B. The second effect is that Child Link can wield a Kokiri Sword when returning from the future, even if you don't have a Kokiri Sword in your inventory. So our next topic is how to make Bottle Adventure more useful. In our last example, we used the Lens of Truth, item ID 15, on Child Link's C right, to point to inventory slot 15, which contained the hammer, and so we ended up with a hammer on B. But what if we hadn't had the hammer in inventory? Inventory slot 15 would have been empty. An empty slot is not actually empty, but instead populated with item ID 255. So doing Bottle Adventure from here would put item 255, or quote-unquote empty, on our B button. Not really what we were looking for. So does this mean we have to already own an item if we want to get it onto our B button also? The answer is a relieving no, not at all. Bottle Adventure is incredibly versatile, and we can get items on B that we have never collected normally. In fact, we can put any item value from the whole list on B. That's 256 items, including all the real ones, unequipable ones, and even the unused glitched ones. In order to do this, we'll need some more information from my last video on RBA, namely the functions of inventory addresses past the basic 0 to 23. Since inventory slot numbers are interpreted by the game as offsets from the base inventory slot 0, it makes sense to ask about such slots as 24, 25, and beyond. They simply mean whatever is stored in memory that many bytes after the start of inventory. I will use terminology such as inventory slot 33 to mean the 33rd memory address after the start of inventory, despite such addresses not necessarily having anything to do with your inventory. With this in mind, let's explore what comes after slot 23. Inventory slots 24 through 39 keep track of the amount of ammo you have for sticks, nuts, bombs, arrows, seeds, bomb shoes, and beans. Each slot is 1 byte of information, representing a decimal number of ammo from 0 through 255. Inventory slots 40 through 47 are bit fields representing Link's equipment and upgrades that he has collected so far. In this region, individual bits or segments of a byte may track the state of one type of equipment or upgrade. Slots 48 to 51 are bit fields representing things you have collected on the quest status pause subscreen. This includes songs, sculptulas, heart pieces, spiritual stones, and medallions. Slots 52 to 71 store the maps, compasses, and boss keys that you have collected for each dungeon and dungeon-like area. In this region, each byte represents one dungeon. The 5 most significant bits of each byte are unused, and the 3 least significant bits are the collection flags for the boss key, compass, and map respectively. Slots 72 to 90 store the number of small keys collected in each dungeon and dungeon-like area. In this region, each byte represents one dungeon and is interpreted as a full decimal number from 0 to 255. Slot 91 represents your double defense heart count, a number always set to 20 by the game. While slots 92 and 93 are not used, 94 and 95 are devoted to storing your Skulltula token count. And finally, slots 95 to 255 store a bunch of dungeon flags that get modified as you progress through the dungeons. These include flags for chests opened, rooms cleared, and collectibles acquired. These flags actually go well beyond slot 255. However, since using item IDs to select our inventory slots limits us to the first 256 addresses from the start of inventory, stopping here is sufficient. So arranging data in any of the 256 inventory slots in the regions I've just described can be used for the purposes of Bottle Adventure as a source for what to put on the B button. I'll go through some of these regions as I did in the RBA video, and give an example for how you might leverage it to make good use of Bottle Adventure there. The first region is the normal item screen. The example we walked through earlier with the hammer is fully indicative of how Bottle Adventure works here. When Child has an item from 0 to 23 on C right, and Bottle Adventure is performed, the B button will directly receive the item stored in the corresponding inventory slot. If you have the item, it will go on B. If the inventory slot is empty, Bottle Adventure will cause the B button to be blank if the sortless flag is set, or have the default item, item 0, Decastix, if the sortless flag is not set. As mentioned earlier, this is not an incredibly useful version of Bottle Adventure, since an item can only go on B if you already have the legitimate one. The next region, slots 24 through 39, is for ammo counts. These 16 slots correspond 1-to-1 to the ammo counts of the items that live in the first 16 inventory slots, 0 through 15. So slot 24 stores the ammo count for the item that lives in slot 0, Decastix. Slot 25 stores the count for the item in slot 1, Decanuts. Slot 26 for the item in slot 2, Bombs. This goes on until slot 38, which stores the ammo count for the item that lives in slot 14, Magic Beans. Here, the correspondence to the item list ends, because no items beyond beans need to keep track of an ammo count. Slot 39 is tacked onto the end of this region to keep track of how many beans have been purchased from the vendor. While not technically an ammo count, it's stored here next to the bean ammo count for simplicity. This pattern of 1-to-1 correspondence to the beginning of the item list means that some of the ammo counts don't make any in-game sense, and they aren't actually used at all. For example, slot 29 holds the ammo count for item 5, which is Din's Fire. Of course, this item doesn't really utilize ammo, so this slot is just here to fill space and maintain the 1-to-1 relationship for items further down the list. As mentioned earlier, each slot is 1 byte wide, and the entire byte is read as a decimal number from 0 to 255. So for example, if slot 32 holds the byte 00110010, that means we have 50 ammo of the item that lives in slot number 8, which is Bomb Juice. So now that we understand how the data in this region is structured, let's explore how we can use it to our advantage with Bottle Adventure. Recall from earlier that the item ID stored on Child Link's C right is the selector for what slot we will read our new B button value from. So let's say Adult Link has an item on B whose ID is in the range 20 to 55, a bottle or trade item, so Bottle Adventure is triggered during time travel. Child Link has a small POE equipped to C right. So when we return to Adult, the game looks to update any of Adult Link's equips that might have changed while as Child. It sees the bottle on B and wants to look in inventory to check if that bottle has changed. To find out where to look, it offsets itself by 3 addresses to Child Link's C right. It treats the item ID there, 32, as an inventory address where it thinks it will find the B button's bottle. Inventory address 32, as pointed out earlier, contains the ammo count for Bomb Chews. Currently, we have 50 Bomb Chews. The game thinks this 50 must be the value for the item that the B button bottle changed to while as Child Link, and puts item 50, or the Poacher's Saw, on the B button. Pretty exciting. Some of you may be realizing at this point just how powerful ammo count Bottle Adventure can be. We have direct control over exactly what values reside in our ammo count slots. By acquiring and using ammo, we can put any value we want here, and read that value directly to the B button with Bottle Adventure. If we wanted item 49 on B instead, we could have just spent a bomb chew before returning to adult. If we wanted item 13 on B, we could have just spent a bunch of bomb chews, until our ammo count was 13. And this process can be done with more than just a PO on C right and bomb chews, of course. This exact same process can be done with a fairy, item 24, on Child Link C right. This will point the game to inventory slot 24, which holds the ammo count for Deku Sticks, or a fish, item 25, pointing to slot 25, which holds the ammo count for Deku Nuts. Any pairing will work, so you can use whichever is the most convenient for your speedrun. Of course, there's one restriction. Ammo counts max out at 50. While the ammo count slots can technically hold any number from 0 to 255, it's impossible to ever have an ammo value above 50 for any weapon. So does that mean Bottle Adventure can only place items 0 through 50 on our B button? Nope, but for items above 50, we will need to utilize a different region of memory to read our B value from, one whose slots can contain any number from 0 to 255. The easiest region to use for setting up Bottle Adventure with any of the 256 items is the region containing the collection flag bit fields in slots 49 to 51. Each byte in this region is actually treated as a collection of 8 distinct on-off collection flags corresponding to songs, medallions, spiritual stones, and other quest status inventory items. So by playing the game using glitches and sequence breaks, it's possible to acquire those items in such a combination that the groupings of 8 collection flags combine to form any arbitrary number from 0 to 255 in binary. For example, let's look at slot number 50, whose 8 bits from most to least significant correspond to having collected 8 songs: Sun's Song, Saria's Song, Epona's Song, Zelda's Lullaby, Prelude of Light, Nocturne of Shadow, Requiem of Spirit, and Serenade of Water. Let's say we want to perform Bottle Adventure with the purpose of getting item number 169, a glitched item that behaves like eye drops on our B button. The number 169 in binary is 10101001. We can match this number to the arrangement of songs in inventory slot 50, and recreate value 169 by collecting Sun's Song, Epona's Song, Prelude of Light, and Serenade of Water, while making sure not to collect any of the other 4. Once the full byte value at slot 50 has been constructed to match the item ID value we want on B, all that remains is to retrieve that value with Bottle Adventure. To read from inventory slot 50, Child Link's C right button must hold item number 50, or the Poacher's Saw. So simply put a bottle or trade item on Adult Link's B button, travel back in time to Child Link, equip Poacher's Saw to C right, and then return to Adult Link once again. Item 169 will be on B exactly as we want it. Keep in mind that not every bit field inventory slot is capable of forming all 256 item values, because even with glitches and sequence breaks, it's not possible to set the collection flags in all combinations. However, every one of the 256 item values is possible to make, using one inventory slot or another, so get creative in your routing. There are more regions of memory that I mentioned earlier that are usable for constructing the B button value that we want to use, but the examples I've just described, combined with my explanations of those other memory regions in my RBA video, should be enough for you to utilize them yourself. The next point I want to bring up is an alternate means of performing Bottle Adventure. As discussed, time traveling via the Master Sword pedestal is one way to cause Bottle Adventure to happen. However, there is technically another way to time travel and cause the game to perform the equip resolving algorithm we walked through before. In Ocarina of Time, all cutscenes are live action sequences that simply remove player control to make it feel like a movie. Due to this fact, Link retains all equips he would have had if the player actually did have control. Luckily for us, the Light Arrow cutscene, or LAX for short, takes place mainly as Adult Link, but also has a flashback section, where Link is a child again. The sequence LAX gives us, therefore, is adult, child, and adult again, exactly what we need for Bottle Adventure. This method of BA is quite useful, since it does not require the use of the Master Sword pedestal. Using the sword to go back and forth in time requires having beaten Forest Temple, and also makes having a bottle on B difficult, since we usually use a sword item on B to skip past the Door of Time. Of course, opening the Door of Time removes this issue, but that's often very slow and unnecessary. Overall, this one-time Bottle Adventure with LAX can solve many tricky routing issues that Master Sword BA often can't. There is one caveat though. Since the Child Link portion of the BA sequence takes place in a cutscene, we cannot actually set Child Link's C right button equip at that time, so you'll need the foresight to equip properly when you leave the past previously. So the last topic of this video is a long one, and it starts with an admission. I may have led you to believe that it's impossible for Bottle Adventure to affect Child Link's B button, but that's not entirely true. there's an extension of Bottle Adventure that we'd like to call Child BA, because it allows for Bottle Adventure to affect Child B. In past years, this Child BA was useful to allow Child Link to use items he could not otherwise equip, such as the Megaton Hammer. This usefulness was eclipsed in 2017 due to the discovery of Equip Swap, a glitch that allows you to equip any inventory item as any age. But despite Child BA mostly falling out of favor, I'd like to talk about it in this video anyway. First though, I need to introduce something called Temporary B, an alternate copy of the B button that the game tracks during times when the B button is in flux. For example, let's say I have the Master Sword on B, and then I climb on Epona. The B button will change to be the bow and arrow, since Link is on horseback. When I get off Epona, the game needs some sort of reference for what item to restore to the B button. It's the responsibility of Temp B to track that. So when I climb Epona, the Live B button, or the Master Sword in this example, is copied to Temp B. Live B is set to be the bow and arrow, and then when we dismount from Epona, the contents of Temp B are copied back to the Live B button and we get Master Sword back. Temp B is also employed in the fishing pond, archery games, and Bombchu bowling, to name a few. So our main course of action for executing Child Bottle Adventure will be the following. First, we will do regular Adult Bottle Adventure to change Adult's B button to be whatever we want to eventually be on Child B. We will then store a copy of this new B button item in Temp B by climbing on and off a horse. We will travel back to Child Link and restore the now stale Temp B value to Child Link's B button. This is much easier said than done, however. First, there are quite a few pitfalls which can destroy the Temp B value along the way. Performing any action which dims the B button, such as swimming or climbing a ladder or vines or entering a house, will cause Temp B to be zeroed out. And of course, taking any action which copies the Live B button to Temp B will cause you to lose your old Temp B. This is all not to mention that we still don't know a way to restore Temp B to Child Link's Live B, but we'll get to that now. Those of you who have run some glitch-heavy routes before may know that dying without a sword on B, such as during RBA with a bottle on B, can cause you to respawn with a Deca Stick on B instead. Of course, there's a reason for this. When you die, the game makes a check for the contents of the B button. If there's a sword there, all is well and you will have that sword upon respawn. If there's not a sword there, the game attempts to back itself up by restoring Temp B to the Live B button upon respawn. Since so many actions serve to zero out Temp B throughout your gameplay, this value is basically always 0, and so you end up with item 0, Deca Sticks, on B. But what if we had a non-sword item on Live B, and Temp B was something other than 0 here? Then, when we died, we would have that something on our B button. There's a big problem though. Almost every action you can take to remove sword from your B button to initiate this process also clears out Temp B. Except for one. There is one way that we know of in the whole game to remove a sword from your B button without also changing the value stored at Temp B. Ganon knocking away your sword. When Ganon knocks away the sword at the start of the fight, your Live B button is set to be blank, or item 255. Whatever you had on Temp B is preserved through this change. So then if you die, Temp B should be restored to the B button. Almost. Turns out the developers sort of foresaw this exact issue and hard-coded a death in the Ganon fight to put Master Sword on B no matter what. Luckily for us though, we can escape the Ganon fight after having our sword knocked away by using the Ocarina items glitch to play a warp song. We can't use Ocarina though because they foresaw that option as well. So I know that was a long-winded and confusing explanation, so I'll lay out the steps for Child BA more succinctly now with an example. Let's say we want Megaton Hammer on Child Link's B button. First, we must perform Bottle Adventure normally to put the hammer on Adult B. I'll let you figure out that part for yourself. Then, we need to copy the hammer to Temp B, most easily done by climbing and immediately dismounting a horse, since the game needs to remember what to put back on B when it's temporarily replaced by the bow on horseback. The next step is to return to Child Link and make your way to Ganon. This is a long trip, likely most easily done by employing the Deca Tree Wrongworm. At no point on the entire trip can you do anything to destroy Temp B. This includes swimming, climbing ladders, climbing vines, or doing anything else to dim the B button. This part is kind of scary because there's absolutely no indication of the contents of Temp B during gameplay. You just have to trust that the hammer is stored there in memory. You arrive at Ganon as Child Link with a warp song and some means of performing Ocarina items handy. You let Ganon knock away your sword from the B button, then perform Ocarina items to warp away from the fight. Finally, once again, without doing anything to destroy Temp B, just die to cause the game to restore Temp B to the Live B button. When you respawn, you will have the Megaton Hammer on your B button and have successfully performed Child BA. I think at this point I've hit all the topics I wanted to talk about. You should now understand how OOT handles equipping across time travel, how we exploit a loophole in that process to cause bottle adventure, how we use our inventory to our advantage in setting up whatever item on B we want, how to cause bottle adventure with the light arrow cutscene, and how to extend bottle adventure to Child Link's B button as well. I hope this video was helpful to you. If it was, be sure to subscribe and check out other videos in my OOT tutorial series for more insight on cool glitches. Thanks for watching.